what does being in Christ mean for our future? And then the second part is, what does it mean for us now in light of all the sin and like competing identities that we wrestle with?
Well, what it means for our future is that we have a future. Because if I'm united to Jesus and he's physically risen and alive and well, then I know I will be too. I can't not be, because again, what is true of him is true of me. So my physical future resurrection, my future bodily hope is as secure as Jesus' grave is empty. So I can know that there will be physical life to come after death in a renewed creation. So I have all the hope in the world because of I would have no access to that hope outside of my union with Jesus. And what it means for me now is that I'm more defined by that than I am by anything else. And so in terms of how I see myself now, the most fundamental thing I see that is I am in Christ a new creation. The old has gone and the new has come. The old Sam, in Adam Sam, has been crucified. And the Sam who now lives is the Sam in Christ who now lives. And so Christ is, I know it's become kind of, the language of finding your identity in Christ has become so well worn it almost means nothing now. But it is literally true. We only come to understand ourselves in as much as we come to understand Jesus and our relationship to him. Because in Revelation chapter 2, the church in Pergamum, he says to the one who overcomes, he will give a new name that only the recipient will know. And so there is a sense in which I have an identity and a self-knowledge now that I could only have through Jesus. Some of which is evidently private between me and him. Some of which I couldn't even begin to articulate. A pastor friend of mine put it this way once. He said, we're more defined by our future than we are by our past when it comes to knowing Jesus. And so many of us have pasts that have defined us, that still hang over us, that we've always felt were going to be defining of us forevermore. And to think, no, Jesus has changed all of that is wonderfully good news.
Well, I mean, let's get specific here. There has been a movement afoot for a number of years, and I know you've been critical of this, to identify a sort of side B of what's called gay Christianity. So the idea is that, well, we understand that acting on disordered desires is wrong, but we still want to acknowledge the fact that we have these desires. You know, certain among us in the church have got these desires, and we're going to have to deal with them. And everyone has sinful desires, right? So of one kind or another. So why not just identify it up front and say, like, this person is a gay Christian? What is the problem with that? Your rationale in this book, I will say, is the clearest I've ever heard this put. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad if that's the case. I want it to be clear. As people who have been made new in Jesus, we still feel the lingering presence of our sinful nature. Sin that we have been justified from, we still feel tempted to go back into. But those things don't define us anymore. So it's not only theologically inaccurate to treat some form of temptation as being defining of who you are, as if it's your ethnicity, right. Which is how that word gay is being used by many people. It's an ethnicity to them. And yet it's something that Christ has died to precisely so that it isn't defining of us anymore. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, such were some of you. Yeah, it did define you, but it doesn't now. The other thing it does is it cuts our own legs out from under us when it comes to seeking to obey Jesus, because the shape of New Testament ethics is be who you now understand yourself to be in Jesus. Put on him and live out that. And so if you think, in this instance, gayness is still a fundamental part of who you are, it's going to make it much harder for you to not live out that identity. It's an unstable compound, and something is going to give either your sense of your true identity being in Jesus or your sense of being a gay person. Those two things can't coexist. So it's a dangerous road to go down. I can understand if someone has just come to faith from a gay background, their first instinct might be to say, "Oh, I'm now a gay Christian."
Right.
So I don't want to launch a theological airstrike on them, because that's an understandable reflex. But in terms of their discipleship, I would hope that they would come to understand themselves with a more kind of rich understanding of what it means to be shaped by our faith in Christ.